Vernon, it's great to chat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the film was really awesome. I think it's incredible. But I wanted to pick your brain first on, what made you want to make a film about Led Zeppelin, and why make it now? Why was now the right time for it?
I think that I wanted to make an inspirational story for young people that had an ambition that perhaps their parents and friends were telling them they would never be able to realise. And I wanted to make a film that they could watch and it would show them how to go about realising that ambition, whatever it might be, against all odds. And this story of Led Zeppelin, the beginning of Led Zeppelin, I'd known since I was 12 years old. So it had inspired me. I'd read it in a little paperback book that had turned up in a box of antiques. My mum was an antique dealer. And I read this book, Led Zeppelin. And it was the first ever biography of the group. And it was just a very straightforward telling of these four individuals and their very different paths through their teenage years as they're trying to become musicians. Some becoming very successful session musicians, others struggling to get heard outside of London, and then they're meeting. And I always liked quest stories as a kid, like the Labours of Hercules or the Odyssey, and this story was like that. So I fell in love with the story before I knew their music. So that's why I wanted to make the film, because it inspired me as a 12-year-old, the story.
Curious, why was the focus on that period of the band's history?
Because the beginnings of stories are the most informative to the audience, to the young audience, the most helpful, and they're the most inspiring. That is the beginning of stories is the most relatable time to any viewer, because it charts the time from before this thing happened to its first events and then its development and all the various problems you're facing. And so any person can relate to those beginnings of stories. With those very, very rare phenomena like Led Zeppelin, the moment they become, or within a year or so that they become hugely popular, wonderful as that music might be, the story in the latter period becomes less and less relevant to other human beings because you're in such a rarefied zone. But at the beginning, everyone can relate to that because you could be the person on that journey.
It's amazing, and hearing the collaboration, it just sounds like such a vital validation of everything that you got to do on the project, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. I do want to pick your brain about the great John Bonham, and I think one of the things that stood out in the movie, and that a lot of people will see, is the unreleased interview audio that you got of him. So could you talk about kind of getting his family's blessing and what that process was like to get that?
Robert Plant, when we met Robert to go to present the film, he arrived with Pat Bonham, who was John Bonham's wife, and they were teenage sweethearts. So no one on earth knows John Bonham better than Pat. And so I presented the film to her at the same time as Robert Plant, and she was really, really sweet. And she arrived with all these unseen photographs of him. And so I'd said at that meeting that I really wanted him to have a voice in the film, and they were like very skeptical that he could have a presence in the film because they weren't aware of any interviews with him. He was notoriously press shy. But sometimes when you make movies, you have a sixth sense that there's something out there. And I had this feeling that we were going to find something. And I found this bootleg recording of an interview with him and Robert. Not terribly good quality, but I could hear this Australian doing the interview. And I could tell listening to it, I thought, this is a radio interview. And I was able to track down the journalist and then the radio station. And they sort of said, we don't have the tape of this interview. And I said, well, have you ever donated tapes? And they said, yeah, well, we've donated some of our tapes to this university in Canberra. And luckily that university had done an American Epic Festival, which he'd helped with. So I called up this university and they looked for it. They didn't have it. And I said, how many uncatalogued tapes do you have? And they said, thousands. I said, would you mind looking through them? And so they started playing these thousands of tapes one by one, and months later I got a phone call, almost midnight, and he said, you buy your email? And I went, yeah, and opened up the email and they'd found this tape with it on. And we got the tape sent over. And then after that, and it was an incredible interview, we found 2 other recordings. Quite quickly afterwards, 2 separate recordings with more dialogue audio from him. Yeah, and then the strangest thing, like almost eerie, was that everything that John Bonham was saying on those tapes was unique commentary that none of the other band had given us. Like he was making observations or talking about things that the other band members hadn't discussed, you know, when the band were formed.
I want to talk about your usage of IMAX in the creation of this film. And how it influenced certain aspects of what you did with the final product.
Right. Well, I mean, it's like, coming from where I've come from and my team has come from, it's like an unbelievable honor to be making an IMAX movie. Because IMAX is one of the only format that is so beyond anything you can have at home. You have a sound and picture world that you cannot begin to replicate in your house. And so as a filmmaker, to be able to be invited into that world, going, we will show your film, is like a monumental honor. And the interesting thing about it, when the film was presented by Sony Pictures Classics, who remind me of like one of the old studios I used to read about as a kid. They're like the guys, Tom Bernard and Michael Barker, that run that studio. They're like the old studio heads from the 40s, and 30s that ran Columbia Pictures and Paramount. I'd read in these books, these guys that go, well, like your film, kid, we're going to make it, you know what I mean? And then this is what we're going to do. They don't create like marketing reports or anything like that. It's like these have an idea and they just do it, And so like, we're going to bring this to IMAX. And then the IMAX team watched the film, and then we heard back like a day later, like they're interested. So I remember very quickly we came in and we were screening the film with the IMAX team. And I just went, it felt like, firstly, we had done a lot of work, like almost like we were making it for IMAX. Like everything in the film that we can get, we got our hands on the original negatives, the original elements. We left no stone unturned. And obviously in IMAX, when you're blowing it up the size of a giant building, you need to have the highest quality material you can. And so it was like, thank goodness that was our process to do that, So this film, through IMAX's help and indulgence and care, will have the best master to screen fidelity of any picture ever made. It's a very broad group of people at IMAX. So it's good at working with IMAX is when you're at IMAX, which is very unusual, it's a very wide-ranging group of people that work there. So if you were at a screening, you'll get a lot of broad opinions. If you turn around in the room, which you like to do, and go, what do you think? What do you think? You'll get a wide range. And then nobody's concerned in IMAX with, what does the boss say? They will say different from the boss if they think so. I've noticed that's an IMAX culture. And so this is why it's fantastic to work with it. It's like the projectionist will happily say the opposite of what the head of sound or picture says or whatever. The whole IMAX thing is like, the thing that's great about it is what is going to be the most immersive and emotional experience for the audience. That's like number one priority from everyone you meet at IMAX. So if you come up with anything that improves that, even if it's like, what the hell, they'll do it. They'll stop the production of the masters at the 11th hour to do that. If they think, and they heard the difference, they could hear it in the room, they could hear the difference. Like everyone was like, my God, huge, in like 0.01 of a second, but you can hear it. It's literally like the normal way you deliver the film. It sounded like one sounded amazing. The way that the film was, you were originally asked, it sounded like the band had all had 3 pints of beer. But interestingly, working on this film and working, IMAX with this, and the thing that's I think is very unusual about Led Zeppelin and their music, I think unique is I cannot imagine another group that I could have listened to this amount, like those first 2 albums, this amount and not grown tired of it. And however much work it was to get the film to what was in our heads and how we presented it to the group, to get that onto the screen, like the way I talked them through it. So that was what you were seeing on the screen, which is really hard to do. I didn't get enormous joy from hearing the music when we were editing it. There was never a day I came in and went, it always picked me up. And so when the songs would come on, I'd be like, oh, this is great. You know?
Yeah.
How do I fix the dialogue that gets us into here? How do I get us through here? When the music would come up, it would be like, hallelujah. Okay, great. So, and I was going through all the wonderful music acts, you know, I've known over the years. And I was really struggling to think of something I could listen to that amount where I wouldn't get tired of it.
If you could make an appeal to fans of Led Zeppelin, why, in your words, should they experience Becoming Led Zeppelin in IMAX?
Why I think is if you like Led Zeppelin, and honestly, if you don't like Led Zeppelin or you don't know anything about them, why I think this film will really like resonate with you in IMAX is this film is made like a feature film. It's designed to take you on this journey with this group. You are going to these concerts with them. You are in these concert halls in 1968 and 69. You are living this with them, and they're almost beside you in the cockpit of this plane as you're hurtling through on their journey. And so what IMAX does is it allows you to feel you're in such an enormous screen. It allows you to feel like you're literally in those concert halls. You're watching those shows. You're hearing whole songs. So you're like on this journey with them, and IMAX is giving you the most visceral, real, sonic and visual experience you could possibly have. And so you don't have to know anything about Led Zeppelin to have a serious trip when you're watching this film. And when we've tested this film out, the number of people that have come out this year, and this is a testament to everyone's work, how much passion the band put into telling their story, but all the team that worked editing this film, Dan and Alison and Nick doing the sound, most people we've screened it for, they walk out of the theatre and they go, I want to go in and watch it again. So the film has been constructed like a musical, like Singing in the Rain or Wicked or whatever example you want to use. It's been designed for you, or the Rocky Horror Show, to watch it multiple times. That's what the film's designed for. It's like a musical trip that you go on every Saturday night if you want to, if it's available to watch. It's been made for that. It's definitely not like watch it once, oh, I know the story. It's like, yeah, it's like a musical.